Also saying that if we get to a point on August 19th, on that deadline for those 50% tariffs to kick in, that if Canada does have to respond, it wouldn't be with reciprocal tariffs. That is what we're hearing from our sources, that instead, what the discussion has been around the table was really the federal government removing the access or partial access to our critical minerals, some of our energy, and making sure that the U.S. is no longer this sort of status that they feel like they get favored nation status coming back this way. So
America may be facing a major problem it never expected from its closest neighbor. Canada has something the U.S. badly needs, and now that resource has become part of a high-stakes trade battle. Ottawa has not shut anything off yet, but the warning is clear. If these talks collapse, Canada could have a powerful card left to play. The trade fight between Canada and the United States is moving into a very serious stage. For years, the two countries have been deeply connected through trade. Canadian goods move south, American goods move north, and both economies depend on this relationship. But now, the talks are becoming much more difficult. Tariffs, cars, dairy, alcohol, steel, aluminum, and other trade issues are all part of the bigger fight. And there's one resource that could give Canada an important advantage: critical minerals. Critical minerals may sound like something far away from everyday life, but they are extremely important. They are used in many modern products and industries. They can be part of batteries, electronics, energy systems, advanced manufacturing, and other important technologies. Some are also important for defense and national security. That is why governments around the world are trying to secure reliable supplies of these materials. Canada has large mineral resources and is an important supplier of many natural resources to the United States. This gives Ottawa something valuable to bring to the negotiating table. The issue is not simply about rocks coming out of the ground. It is about who controls important supplies and how those supplies move between countries. This is where the current trade talks become much more interesting. Canadian officials are discussing many possible trade issues with Washington, while Prime Minister Mark Carney has warned that Canada is ready to respond if an agreement cannot be reached. Canada has options, but officials have not announced that critical mineral exports to the United States are being stopped. The headline, "No more critical minerals for America," sounds like a decision has already been made. But that is not what the current facts show. Right now, it is better understood as a warning about what could become part of the fight if negotiations break down. Canada has not announced a complete mineral export ban against the United States. Still, the possibility is powerful because the United States does not want uncertainty around important supplies. American companies need stable access to materials that support manufacturing and technology. If a major supplier suddenly changed the rules, businesses could face higher costs, delays, or the need to find other sources. That is why critical minerals can become more than just a trade product. And if you want the real story behind how Canada is still holding its ground through tariffs, wars, and hard times, hit join below to join the membership for exclusive documentaries you won't see anywhere else about Canada's progress and rise through uncertainty. They can become a bargaining tool. When two countries are negotiating under pressure, the side controlling an important resource can gain extra influence. Canada does not need to shut down exports to make the issue matter. Simply showing that these supplies could become part of a tougher response can put more pressure on the negotiations. At the same time, Canada also has to be careful. The United States is Canada's largest trading partner, and both countries have built supply chains together for decades. A major disruption would not hurt only American companies. Canadian businesses and workers could also feel the effects. The biggest question now is what happens if the talks fail. Carney has said Canada is prepared to get tougher if there is no deal, but the exact measures have not been announced. That leaves one major question hanging over Washington and Ottawa. How far is Canada really willing to go, and will critical minerals become one of the cards it finally decides to play? Canada does not have to shut down every shipment to make the United States pay attention. The simple fact that critical minerals are being discussed during trade talks shows how valuable these resources have become. Canada can use its mineral supply as part of a larger negotiation. while the United States wants reliable access to materials that support its own industries. But there's another side to this fight. Canada also needs the American market. The two countries have built supply chains together for decades, and many Canadian businesses depend on selling products to American customers. So if Ottawa takes a harder line, it must think about the possible cost at home as well. A major trade battle could hurt workers, companies, and consumers on both sides of the border. That is why the current talks are so important. Canadian and American officials are still talking. On August 6, Canadian officials described their meeting with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer as constructive and detailed. The goal is still a wider trade agreement that can deal with tariffs and other major problems. So despite all the strong words, the door for a deal is still open. Prime Minister Mark Carney, however, has made one thing clear. Canada has options if an agreement cannot be reached. He has said Canada is ready to get tougher if necessary. He has not publicly announced that critical minerals will be blocked from the United States. That means viewers should be careful with claims that America has already been cut off. That has not happened. If negotiations fail, Canada could consider stronger trade measures. The exact response would depend on the situation and the decisions made by the Canadian government. Critical minerals could remain part of the bargaining process because they are strategically important. Canada has reserves of many minerals that are important to defense, technology, energy, and advanced manufacturing. Countries around the world are trying to make their mineral supply chains safer. They do not want factories, batteries, defense equipment, or advanced technology to depend too heavily on one outside source. Canada has been trying to build stronger mineral relationships with trusted partners, including the United States and other allied countries. That gives Ottawa another reason to think carefully about where its resources go. For America, the challenge is also clear. Getting minerals out of the ground is only one part of the problem. The minerals must also be processed, refined, transported, and turned into useful materials. Building those systems can take years. So if a supply becomes uncertain, replacing it quickly is not always easy. That does not mean the United States would suddenly run out of critical minerals if Canada changed its policy. That would be an exaggeration. America has other suppliers and can work to develop more domestic production. But changing suppliers can take time and can cost more money. Right now, the biggest battle is happening around the negotiating table, not at a mine or border crossing. Canada is trying to protect its interests while the United States is pushing for better trade terms. Both governments know that a bad decision could create problems far beyond one industry. There's also a bigger reason this fight matters. Critical minerals are becoming a major part of the global race for technology and energy. Countries want secure supplies because these materials can support batteries, electric vehicles, clean energy systems, electronics, and defense equipment. That means control over these resources can give a country more influence than it may appear to have at first. For Canada, this creates both an opportunity and a risk. Ottawa can use its natural resources to push for better terms, but it must also protect its own economy. If trade restrictions become too aggressive, Canadian companies could lose important customers. If the response is too weak, Canada could lose an important chance to protect its interests. For the United States, the message is also clear. Relying on foreign supplies can create problems when political relationships become tense. Washington has been working to strengthen domestic and allied supply chains, but building new mines and processing facilities takes time. So the mineral question is not going away. It is becoming part of a much larger battle over trade, technology, security, and economic power.